Welcome back from Delta Y. This week we'll be talking about
flexible circuits for 3D printing,
nanoparticles that can take a fantastic voyage,
and thermodynamic magic that enables cooling without energy consumption.
As always, I'm Josh.
This is Grayson.
And welcome to Delta Y.
Alright, so for the first article of the day, we're going to be talking about flexible circuits for 3D printing. Research Cooperation has developed a process suitable for 3D printing that can be allowed to produce transparent and mechanically flexible electronic circuits. The technique can enable new applications such as printable light-emitting diodes, solar cells, or tools with integrated circuits. As the scientists report in the Journal for Scientific Reports, the researchers are demonstrating the potential of their process with a flexible capacitor, among other things. This comes to us from Science Daily.
And this is out of the University of Hamburg and DESY, which is... I'm going to really butcher this real quick, people.
Go ahead.
Deutsches Elektronenien Synchrotron, which was very wrong, but it's... it's a cooperation between those two corporations.
The inner German in me just cringed heavily with when you said that.
And the inner German in me, too. But this is really interesting to me. So, Samsung released the Galaxy Fold recently, and that got me thinking about, they're folding it, but they're using a very mechanical hinge with all the circuitry still placed in two glass slabs. Mm-hmm. So, I saw this, and I'm like, wait, why don't we make the whole thing flex? I think that's totally plausible, and this kind of technology, to see this kind of come about like this, is really interesting to me, because this is exactly what we need for the future of foldable devices. If anything, we have foldable screens, now the trick is foldable devices.
Yeah, so it says in the paper that the researchers were able to produce a flexible capacitor. Now, we have energy storage problems. Batteries aren't actually the best in terms of storing energy and how we can charge our devices both up and power them with batteries. It's not actually the most efficient way to do so. The best theoretical storage device would be something like a capacitor. To have something like that be flexible, and to have it be like a supercapacitor, have that be flexible for something like phones, that would be immense. That would be an immense step towards actual
it'd be a huge phones. Yeah, it'd just be a huge step forward in the technology segment where you wouldn't even have glass in your phone. You wouldn't have, well, you could have glass, but the Galaxy Fold screen is actually plastic because there isn't a bendable glass like that now yet. There is bendable glass, but Corning has developed that, and it's not to the level of plastics right now. Okay. But could you imagine unrolling your phone? You could roll it up to be quite small in your pocket. Mm-hmm. But, this kind of flexible circuits is kind of what we've been hoping for, I think. And if you look back at, devices from CES from, 2016, I believe that, I think it was Sony, or somebody developed, it was a phone that was a completely foldable screen, it rolled up. Mm-hmm. But the actual circuitry was housed in a little part in the bottom. But what this would allow, companies to do would be completely foldable. And I'm also thinking in the biomedical department where you could create, devices that fold up small and could expand inside the body for, monitoring. So you could put something into a small incision in the chest and obviously have it unfold inside your rib cage to monitor, your vitals.
Something like that. I mean, that'd be a little bit too invasive and then have to get into, the biocompatibility of such a device. But what intrigues me more is that they were actually able to build a flexible integrated circuit. On top of the manufacturing problems that you need for integrated circuits themselves, to have that be flexible, that's made of silicon and a bunch of other metals that aren't inherently or have, a very low modulus of elasticity.
Yeah, and, that's the really impressive part, is that they're creating a conductive path that is flexible. It's weird to me to think about that these materials are not inherently flexible. But the process they're using to layer them allows them to be flexible, yet still be conductive.
Interesting. So it says using a bright X-ray light from... I'm just going to call it Daisy because go
right ahead.
I'm not gonna be able to pronounce that at all. So Daisy, that's the research facility. They used a research light source Petra 3 as a measuring method. The team has precisely analyzed the properties of the nanowires. So it's inside of a polymer of some kind. A lot of these wires,
which makes sense to me because you'd want to protect them, but still allow them to it's essentially like a wire itself. Like you're gonna encase it in something.
Yeah, so it's like silver nanowire, which is typically several tens of nanometers, millionths of a millimeter thick. So it's from anywhere from 10 to 20 micrometers, thousands of a millimeter long, to anywhere from several tens of nanometers.
And they're using a mesh. It sounds like they're using sort of a mesh as their conductor. So they're, instead of using a straight wire, and not a like stranded wire either, they're using more of a mesh system where I think it's more like a lattice of wiring.
Well, that would actually
conduct.
Well, that actually makes sense to me, because then that way, what you're essentially doing is hammering out a wire into an extremely thin portion, and you could use something like that for, say, like touch screens, for example. Just have a 2-layer lattice and then have them be extremely close together, and touching points on that lattice would be able to be like, oh, that's a point that the person's touching,
and it does
because
say
it connects for the circuit.
And it says here that the conductivity of this mesh that they're creating improves actually because of the compression by the polymer.
Really?
So they're actually improving the conductivity of the wire they're using by squishing it into this, design.
Like, really?
So it's gonna, this is essentially what they're saying is they've created a flexible, more efficient circuit style. Which is huge to think about, because that's an implication that this process not only could be, ergonomic to hold and just kind of, use day to day, but it could be more efficient. So you could have, less heat dissipation, more power efficiency, things like that.
And it's all transferable to a 3D printable like a design that's 3D printable. It's all going to be able to transfer over to something that can be manufactured.
Now, obviously, when we say 3D printable, we mean very nice 3D printers. We're talking $50,000 plus machines. And, I mean, these can do nanometer layer, or not
very high resolution. Well, nanometers, essentially, because I can't think of any...
Actually, nanometers, because the article we're talking about next after this, nanometers is what they're printing in. So, that's obviously, they're still a ways away from using that in manufacturing, but the idea behind the technology is there. So the idea behind this technology is available. It's just getting it into a place where it can be industrialized. That's the biggest problem, and I've talked about this before. If you want to create a technology that comes to mass market, you have to find a way for it to make money. Because if a company or an industry in whole sees a way to make money off of something, they'll jump on it immediately because they can produce it and profit from it.
Yeah.
That's the trick in our society is if you can find something that not only people will buy, if people will buy it, and you can get a profit off of it without being extremely overpriced for the average consumer, industry jumps on it. That's why, foldable phones haven't hit the market fully yet. Samsung had the capita to produce, a few thousand of them, which sold out, and then now they're recalled and getting delayed.
Yeah.
But they were able to push that boundary where some phone manufacturers either are a little afraid to because they don't want to jeopardize their markets, or, they just can't afford to. And I think that in the next few years, we'll start to see that become a thing, foldable phones and foldable circuits, because industry wants to make money. And if you can produce something consumers will buy that's new, that's how you make money. That's why...
Build it and they will come, sort of thing.
Exactly. That's why, Apple, I think, is going to go that route in the next couple of years, because their shares of cell phone percentages worldwide has gone down.
Their shares have gone down, but...
They're still,
they're transitioning more over to services than actual products now. Like I can't think of anything beyond like MacBooks and iPhones, and
they don't make the iPod. They don't make the iPod anymore. They haven't updated the Mac Pro in 4 or 5 years. They're not innovating like they used to, and it shows. And
I doubt they've...
the iPhone hasn't progressed. I mean, the last thing was the iPhone X in 2018 or 2017.
Personally, I haven't seen them innovate past, what was it, iOS 10 or something?
It's been like
their design hasn't changed.
They did. I believe the iPhone X uses an OLED display. I don't quote me on that. I actually could probably Google it right now. But I'm just saying that Apple and Samsung, they used to be bitter rivals. But, I think Samsung is just going way ahead. And that's the, interesting part. And yeah, iPhone X is OLED. So, Apple, that was the last big step they took was OLED. But, Samsung's been there for a number of years. And it's just it's a catch-up game now. So, are we going to see Apple try to leapfrog its competitors? Samsung has a foldable phone. I think Huawei is working on one.
Huawei is working on a foldable phone.
And there's a couple others I think are working on one. I was going to make a joke about Motorola being the first, like a decade ago, with a foldable phone, but that was a flip phone.
Yeah, you can't fold Nokias, so we aren't going with jokes for that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, dude, the Motorola Razr, oh, that was a great foldable phone, if you ask me.
There you go.
It folded perfect every time.
Oh, jeez.
But back to this,
it's just the phone looks at you, it's just like, am I the first foldable phone of Samsung? It's just like, am I a joke to you?
No, but, this kind of ability to 3D print a flexible circuit is huge, I think. Mm-hmm. And, not only for phones, but could we see different laptop designs? I mean, you could create a laptop that has a screen for the keyboard, essentially mitigating the need for mechanical keys, which a lot of people love mechanical keys, but you can't get away from the fact that if you can seal a laptop up, if you could give an XP, like a rating to a laptop for waterproofness,
that was like XP7 or 67.
Yeah. Like, could you imagine that if your laptop was waterproof rated?
Yeah, that would be great.
I would give up mechanical keys for that.
Yeah, the thing I would see this actually impacting more is wearables. Because you can now, that's why the integrated circuit bit was so fascinating for me, because a lot of wearables are more like surface mount components. They're very bulky. They're not like the stuff that we have inside watches and phones is all SMD or surface mount, where most of the other stuff is through hole, and that's a lot bulkier. It's got a lot of problems when it comes to integrating it with like clothing. So like clothing seems to be like a huge frontier right now. I think Google had like a project solely or something that they were working with wearables for within textiles.
But I could see this being a big thing in sportswear, where you could have a shirt with flexible circuits in it that could measure the salt content of your sweat to see if you're dehydrated.
Well, we had an article a couple weeks ago having to do that with graphene, like one little patch.
Yeah, but this is I think that this is much more attainable to the point where, because graphene obviously is in its infancy, and I think that companies, if you say flexible circuit and graphene, one of those is going to jump out a lot more to a board, of businessmen.
Yeah.
It's not going to be graphene because that's too scientific, I feel, for... I shouldn't say that, but, like, it's too,
It's not worth the investment in terms of how much money you have to put into it to get something like graphene out to... Like, it's a very finicky material. It's a very finicky material.
Exactly, and it's in its infancy of design and, testing. It's really a fragile material right now that needs to be refined, versus... if you can 3D print a flexible integrated circuit, that is a huge market you can open up for things you can do with it.
Yeah, so medical devices, sportswear, I mean, heck, even consumer clothing that has some kind of integrated circuit within it. Like, I remember seeing like an art show at our university that had someone had, I forget what it was. It was like a wearable helmet that had like lights on it, but the guy, I talked with him afterwards, and he's like, yeah, I had to solder these all on, and it was a pain. It says in here that actually you can do light-emitting diodes for this, and have that be flexible inside the helmet that they were doing for their fashion show. That would eliminate the need for that.
And considering how flexible LED strips are already, that would be a huge thing. You could create, very thin connections between them that are extremely pliable, so you could put them infinitely more places than you can now. I mean, obviously, current light strips are, a centimeter wide and, however long you want them. But if you can create them to a point where it's just the LED and the wiring is hyper flexible to the point where it just goes wherever you want, it's just as strong.
It's basically EL wire almost.
Yeah, you're shooting towards what optical fibers can do.
Yeah, no, just 3D print a solar-powered LED that's got like some sort of dummy surface to it, and you just throw it, and it's like a little bit of a sticky bomb. I can see someone trying to do that. Yeah. I can see someone trying to do that.
But obviously, this is still in its infancy, but, you can tell we're both really excited for this, and I'm excited to see where this goes. Will this catch on? I think this is something that would catch on in industry and just be a huge benefit to the world. But, on that topic... The next thing we're going to talk about is nanoparticles. So
down still on that small scale.
Yes. So researchers from MIT, who else would be doing this, obviously, have developed a magnetic microbot that can push drug delivery particles into tumors. So we were talking about this before, and obviously the bloodstream is a very defined tube, right? You don't have pores, but where tumors lie on the bloodstream, it creates a porous surface almost. So developers at MIT and engineers at MIT created this robot that's kind of like the ships from Fantastic Voyage, which is from the 1960s. And this is really interesting because it's inspired by the flagellum propulsion that normal bacteria uses. They're using a helix to essentially propel these bots through. And what they do is they create an external magnetic field that activates that, the flagellum behind this microbot, and it pushes through, and the flow it creates by swimming against the current of the bloodstream allows particles, or drug particles, to enter the tumor. So the current disruption that it creates next to a tumor that allows these particles to get into the tumor to help treat it.
Interesting. This is all over my head. I mean, so they're applying an external magnetic field to this?
Yeah, so these are 3D printed robots with a super high resolution, obviously. Then they're coated with nickel. Then what they do is they send it, so they tested this on a microfluidic system that mimics blood vessels. Mm-hmm. They send it in, and using external magnets outside the body, they apply a magnetic field to the robot, which rotates that flagellic helix that they created, which creates a convection current which pushes 200 nanometer polystyrene particles into the tissue.
So they tested it with polystyrene, but this could theoretically work with any kind of drug application.
Yeah, you could use this for most, and it's quite safe, and it's obviously, it's easy to target this using that external magnetic field. So you could, use this to reduce inflammation. They're quoting this as you could use this to reduce inflammation at the site, and that's really cool to me. That this is it's a
targeted delivery service, basically.
Yeah, and it's not using a micro robot. They call it a micro robot, but really it's a micro. I don't know how to.
It's not necessarily a robot. It's more like nano. Like it is basically a nanoparticle that's influenced by external stimuli.
Yeah, and they base this off a bacteria called Magnetospirillum magneticum, which naturally produces a chain of iron oxide. So what that does is it helps the bacteria orient themselves.
Wait, a bacteria that naturally
produces iron oxide. It naturally produces rust.
Interesting, because the only other animal that I can think of, or any other like living creature that I can think of, is birds, because they have in them like a kind of, I guess, best way to, it's kind of like an iron nucleus, because that's how they're able to orient themselves and go north when they migrate. And go south. That's the only other creature that I can think of that does something like that has naturally occurring like deposits of iron in their body.
The really cool thing about this is that they're using that technique and the other technique of an external force to guide these these little, we'll keep calling them robots, to where they need to be. And these carrier robots are actually big enough to carry CRISPR genome editing into the body, which is a huge deal. And so I think that's really cool that this could be one of the biggest steps we take towards targeted cancer treatments.
Well, not even targeted cancer treatments, because there's
targeted treatments.
Well, targeted treatments in general. I'm actually interested because it actually says this at the tail end of the article, but it
loves CRISPR.
It's about CRISPR, yeah, but that's got huge implications in general for healthcare in terms of genetic editing and genetic therapy for a lot of stuff. Because what if you have a specific area of your body that's like acting up, say for like celiac disease or something like that needs to be treated? You don't want to go treat, like, if the edit that's needed is wide and it's editing multiple slices of DNA, you don't want that to be affecting the whole body, because you don't know what kind of a genetic edit that would have, what kind of effect that genetic edit would have and how it would cascade. Having this perfectly target the area that needs to be resolved, especially with this magnetic magnetic helix method. It's like this is, like you're saying, it's huge. It's really huge, and how it's going to be affecting healthcare in the next couple coming decades.
Exactly, and I will go back on what I said, that Magnetospirillum magneticum bacteria. They were using that for a swarm method to see if they put this type of bacteria in, they could have it lead a swarm of other bacteria, or just deliver things. So you could deliver a lot of a drug or of a DNA modification using a swarm method, which to me is really cool that they're able to do that. And obviously this is still in its infancy, but it has funding behind it from the Swiss National Science Foundation and other places around the world. So it'll be interesting to see, can they produce something even more efficient? Is this model of propulsion the best way to do it? But I think that this is a big step forward, and this is something in the long run that's been coming for a while, because the flagellum method of propulsion by bacteria is just such a interesting thing to watch.
It's kind of like, how would you describe it? It's kind of like fish wagging their tail back and forth, kind of.
It's like if you put a dog's tail on a brick and sent it in the water and just had the dog super excited. That's how it works, really. It's so interesting to watch how
a brick.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's how badly. I mean, yeah, it's a rounded brick. That's what bacteria is a lot of the time, for their shape. And you throw this flagellum on the back, and they can swim a decent amount, against bloodstream, which is, a high, a forceful thing. If you cut yourself, it squirts. Like these things are super efficient, and it's really interesting. It's going to be interesting to see. How big can they make these to make them safe? What can you put in them? How will they develop this for all sorts of different medical applications?
Yeah, because there's some drugs that are larger than others, obviously, in terms of their molecular size and how that's going to... I wonder if they're actually going to probably use that swarm method eventually for some larger drugs if they can't make that specific...
Yeah. Well, that's obviously something that's going to be developed in the coming, years and decades, and we'll have to keep our eye out for that to see, what can they do with it, how can they improve this, and really, how is it going to get better?
Yeah, but on another note, there's the last article that we're going to be talking about, somewhat in the same vein in terms of manipulation of matter, I guess, is the thermodynamic magic, as it says in the article.
So this is from the University of Zurich.
Yeah, Zurich, where physicists have developed an amazingly simple device that allows heat to flow temporarily from a cold to a warm object without an external power supply. So,
and I love how in this article they have to assure you that they're not breaking the laws of physics.
Yeah, no.
That was a big headline of this.
Well, it's just like, oh, okay, wait, you can do this without injecting any other energy into the system. Hey guys, we might need to rewrite the standard model again.
Essentially, so what they did was they cooled a 9-gram piece of copper from over 100 degrees centigrade to below room temperature without an external water or power supply. And essentially what this means is you could cool water from boiling temperature and freeze it without using any energy.
Well, I don't know if it says it in here, but how long it actually took for something like that to happen. Because, I mean, natural, if it's, obviously it's going to be faster, even slightly, otherwise it wouldn't really be making the news, than natural, just Newton cooling.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to see by how much.
Well, so their record was only a difference about 2 degrees centigrade in comparison to ambient temperatures.
Okay.
Because they used an element essentially out of a minibar of a hotel, and they induced a oscillating heat current, which changed how the flow of heat between the two bodies worked. So essentially, it temporarily allowed the flow from a colder to a warmer object, so that it would cool down that cold object even more.
Interesting.
And it's called a thermal oscillation circuit.
Interesting. And it also says in here that, according to Schilling, one of the main scientists on this research, it would be possible to achieve cooling of negative 47 degrees C.
Mm-hmm.
That, that's way below room temperature and freezing.
So, that would be an ideal element for cooling, though, which has yet to be invented. But it's a simple technology that if you use large amounts of hot, solid, liquid, or gaseous material, you could cool them well below room temperature without any energy consumption. And I think this is a huge deal as we move forward in the world with renewable energies, because we're going to have battery banks around the world, and we have to keep them cool somehow. And so if you could create a way to passively cool anything, I think that's a huge deal.
Well, I mean, my first bet would probably just be to stick all those battery banks below ground.
Geothermal properties. You'd hit a weird point where
you
could heat them up accidentally if you put them in the wrong place.
I know, but we're talking like middle of America where there's the most wind power. Putting those battery banks
underground.
Underground. I mean, similar to what they do with nuclear power. Like I read recently, like we could store the entirety of the U.S.'s nuclear waste, like from its inception to present, in a football field. Mm-hmm. Like that's way much more that's way less waste than anything from coal or natural gas or any of this other stuff that does any kind of like oil, any kind of oil or
anything that isn't quote unquote renewable. Like technically I think that a lot of people call nuclear a renewable source.
Well, I mean,
which I guess to a point is efficient.
Isn't there a way to? I'm not remembering properly, but I think there might be a way to actually reintroduce nuclear fission into already depleted uranium or plutonium. I may be completely wrong on that,
and I don't know the answer to that. So,
no, but that's. Like, a lot of people throw out nuclear whenever they're talking about renewables because of the threat of, obviously, the big scare of radiation and all this nuclear, weapons and whatnot. When we think of nuclear, the first thing we think of is nuclear weapons. When it has such an upside in terms of energy production, it's comparable to, like oil and natural gas, but it doesn't have that kind of waste. We just have to manage it properly.
Yeah, the proper thing. Yeah, the trick there is like that waste would be around for tens of thousands of years. So you got to store it.
We can just ship it off to the moon. It's fine.
That's the other trick. I mean, I think that's something we really as a human race should be exploring is depositing our nuclear waste somewhere deep in space where we won't get to it, or Icarusing it towards the sun.
I mean, that's what my thought was. What would happen if we threw it towards the sun?
Yeah. But, back to this thermal device, I think that this could be, a huge thing for a lot of different reasons. We could have much more efficient fridges, computer systems, cooling for homes. Mm-hmm. I mean, obviously this is very much so in its infancy. And
the article itself says that the potential application is still a long way off.
But the inception of devices like this is a really cool thing, is why I really like doing this podcast, is you find out about things that you wouldn't have found out normally. Like, I wouldn't have been looking for this normally, and this doesn't pop up on your normal, news site. So, finding stuff like this where, they're hopeful that they're able to make it work eventually, and that they're obviously trying to get this to work is a really cool thing. Mm-hmm. And which is why I love the STEM field so much.
Yeah.
And it's just that innovation here, and, they're like, we don't know if it's going to work more, we might if you did this, but, that uncertainty is really interesting to me. It's like, these people have such great ideas, the ability to execute them, and they want to. And seeing something like this that they're essentially knocking on the doors of physics, going, "Hi, we'd like to cool something past what you want us to do."
Yeah,
that the ability there to kind of just test reality.
Yeah, it's really a little bit. I'm not exactly sure if this is a device. It almost looks like just a black Coke can or some kind of it almost looks like an Amazon Alexa tower.
Yeah, it kind of looks like a cylinder, and obviously we'll have all these articles linked below.
I don't even know if that's actually the device or if they're just using that as a photograph for just the Science Daily thing.
But it is obvious. I believe this is a contacts thing. So you'd have to have contact in whatever you're cooling, which that would make sense.
What would be really cool is if they were able to do this without, have it suspend, put this on the ISS and do it through suspension, without gravity.
That would be really cool.
Just have beams of coal just targeting the thing. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. So obviously this is something in its infancy, and it's really impressive that they cool a 9-gram piece of copper already. That's very impressive. To well below room temperature without an external power supply. Mm-hmm. And that was with a really inefficient, cooling element. So, seeing this in its infancy and thinking, talking about this like this and just thinking about what it could be used for is always a lot of fun. So, this is definitely something that I don't think we'll see come into the market for decades, because it's...
I don't even really think we're going to see this type of...
but it does give hope.
This type of research pop back up again in a while, just mainly because this is something that I haven't heard of, for any application, or even know something like this would be possible.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's the trick, is that, it's going to take time to develop this, and obviously they're even saying, they can't really do much with it yet until they create a better way to do it. You know, it's the technology of our time is holding them back a little bit.
It works, but it's only the it's only it's partly the theory that's working. There is a device that works, but it can still go way farther.
Yeah, exactly. And on that note, I think it's about time we wrap up this week's episode. As always, we'd like to thank you for watching, and we hope you enjoyed this week. We'll link all the articles below, and we always want to thank you guys for tuning in to Delta Y. Not a lot of you do yet, and we hope that, we can somehow grow this. And, we've been saying that for 24 episodes, and I think that, we'll find a way to do it, and I always want to just keep hopeful that we will do it. So, in 5 years' time, if we're still doing this somehow, and you're coming back to episode 24 and being like, these guys were absolute lunatics.
Yeah.
We want to thank you for doing so. And as always, I'm Josh.
This is Grayson.
And thank you for listening to Delta Y.